Hello and welcome to The Hop, a marketing podcast. I'm your host, Matt Taylor Farrington from Purple Bunny Marketing, and today I am joined by Martin from BizGuard. Thanks for coming in, Martin.
Absolute pleasure.
And today we're going to talk about cybersecurity and the impacts that has on small business. Obviously a fairly serious matter when it comes to protecting your business. So I guess the first question I have for you, Martin, is, cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated. I know sometimes I get an email come through and I go, oh, could that be real? Could it not? But why are small business, I guess more so now, prime targets for those? And why do cyber criminals target those small businesses? And what are the biggest risks that they face today?
We can probably start just by throwing some numbers out there, because every good podcast should start with some scary numbers, right?
Yes.
Late last year, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, which is the government department responsible for managing cybercrime, they released some stats from 2024.
Yes.
And we learned a couple of really interesting things from that. The first one is that actually same number as the previous year, they're still taking about 240 calls or emails every single day reporting cybercrime. So that's roughly one every 6 minutes. And we know a good deal of those are small businesses. Yep. And the other interesting thing is that there's been an 8% increase in the average cost per cybercrime to a small business. It's gone up to almost 50 grand.
Yes.
So when you look at that and pair that with the inverse numbers, which is that medium and larger businesses have a decrease in the number of cybercrimes that are actually hitting, and a decrease in the cost per cybercrime. Yes. And the main reason is that they're really starting to get it together when it comes to cybersecurity. So we've been seeing that for years now, that a lot of security vendors have been targeting larger organizations to try to get their tools in there and to uplift the cyber skills. Yes. And I'm sure everybody remembers the big drive around COVID of wanting to find cybersecurity skills. That's come down a little bit, but there's still a lot of demand in the market for that.
Yes.
And a lot of that filters up to the larger organizations being better protected. You look at the hackers, or the threat actors as we call them, it sounds silly, but they're trying to run a business. Yes. And they're going to go where the money is. And right now, the larger organizations they were targeting have become hard targets. And so they're going to look at the softer targets, which are the small businesses that are less prepared.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of them are mum and dad businesses and the likes, who potentially can't afford the same level of protection.
Exactly right.
That some of those big businesses can. And obviously, and some of them, the stats you were reporting there about what is reported, how much isn't reported as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's a wildly underreported stat.
Yeah, correct. That don't know that they've actually been hacked or had an incident or anything like that. So it's quite scary, actually. So... all right. Well, this is a marketing podcast, so I had to link it to marketing, right?
Absolutely.
So, many people don't realize how cyber security affects marketing. So can you elaborate a little bit about how a data breach, a phishing attack, a website hack impact could happen to a company, and I guess what that could do to their brand reputation, or, potentially affect trust with the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I've been seeing in the marketing space quite a bit more over the last year or two is that, building trust has become a much more difficult and important thing.
Yes.
And once you've built that trust, eroding it is really dangerous because you often can't get it back.
Yes.
So, there's probably nothing that's going to throw a spanner in the works harder when you're trying to grow your business than having a cyber breach. So because first of all, you're losing momentum, you're now dealing with a breach instead of growing your business. But second of all, you now have a whole bunch of clients coming to you saying, well, what does this mean? Is my data out there? What's going on? So it's a really difficult situation to be in. And I've worked a number of incidents over the years where it's an afterthought almost as to how we're going to manage the fallout. And there's a lot of things you can do to be prepared, like having a couple of email templates ready to go just in case, even just a generic customer notification template. A lot of small businesses that are growing, that are just starting their marketing journeys, don't even have a good mechanism to send email blasts out to their clients outside of the marketing system. So that's one of those really important things that they can do. But ultimately, just making sure that all of the right security stuff is in place can help with that as well, because ultimately you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your reputation. Yeah,
agreed. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think a lot of insurance companies try and insist now that you have some sort of data breach process or system ready to go, and that you have the communication ready, because these things can happen sometimes at midnight, 1 a.m, whenever, and you need to be ready to get out to your customer base as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be a massive, 30-page document. It could just be 1 or 2 pages to say, this is what we do when there's an incident.
Yes.
And your staff are going to be infinitely better equipped than if they're trying to figure it out on the go.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And there we go. Our first 100% for season 3. Had to work it in. All right. So I guess coming back to vulnerabilities and the impacts, what are some of the most common cybersecurity mistakes small business can make? And I guess what are some of the quick fixes or some best practices that they could implement quickly to try and protect themselves?
Yeah, look, I think I would probably be evicted from my industry if I didn't say turn on multi-factor authentication on everything.
Really?
Yeah, you might have heard that before. There's a rumor going around.
I've heard 2FA bugs me or annoys people, but anyway.
Absolutely.
So yes.
But look, that I guess closely links to I think the real answer, which is that all small businesses in Australia and probably the world actually have the same vulnerability, and that's people. Small businesses tend to have less systems, right? So in larger organizations, there's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of technology that has to be protected. The average small business doesn't have that so much. The vulnerability is the humans.
Yes.
And protecting humans is unfortunately quite complicated, especially against themselves.
Yes.
So probably the thing that I see the biggest flaw, I guess the biggest chink in the armor of the average small business from a cybersecurity perspective is that they underestimate how much they need to do to prepare their people. They think, we've got MFA, we're good. And then they kind of just, pat themselves on the back and say, that's it, that's all we need to do. But the reality is, things like MFA are quite easy to bypass now for hackers. So it's not a silver bullet the way that it used to be maybe 5-10 years ago. So really wrapping those layers of protection around the people is the only way we've had success in protecting small businesses. And the idea with those different layers is that hopefully if the hacker gets through one, then one of the other layers actually catches them.
Yes. Agreed. All right. Obviously, we see it in the news and we've heard it in the news. There's been multiple cyber attacks last year and over the last couple of years. We've, the Optus one, there's been all sorts, Medibank, just 2 that spring to mind. But, protecting customer data is becoming more and more important, I guess, for business. But more and more, there's now laws that are tightening up around that in that space. So how can business ensure that they are safeguarding client information while still running effective digital marketing or, just generally operating their business?
Yeah, look, that's a really big area to cover. I guess the really key things for me are to begin with, only collect the data you really need.
Yes.
So one of the things that we see is really prevalent is people collect much too much data. And this is really, I guess, easy to do, especially if you're running like scorecard marketing funnels, that kind of thing. We're doing a lot of quizzes, especially if you're in B2C and you're asking for personal information about somebody, if you're a coaching business, that kind of thing. You're going to be collecting a lot of personal information, or if you're a healthcare business. So making sure you only collect the data you really need to actually run your campaign is a really important one. Even to the point where, some people collect dates of birth so they can send birthday reminders. And that's a really cool thing. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
But you don't need someone's year of birth to do that. You just need the day and the month. So maybe just collect those 2 pieces of data and not the year. And then that limits the usefulness or the value of that data to somebody else.
Yes.
So only collecting the bare minimum is kind of point 1. And point 2, to tie it back to what you mentioned there in the Optus breach, is delete data when you don't need it anymore.
Yes.
So that was one of the big things in the Optus breach, right? Is people, it was bad enough that people who were customers got done and they had their driver's licenses and all their personal information leaked. But previous customers who had no dealings with Optus for years were also caught up in that because they failed to delete the data when they didn't need it anymore.
Yes.
So making sure that you delete the data when you don't need it is actually really critical.
Yeah, and I think, we're in a day and age now where there's a lot of technology that you can use to set up automations that, if a client's file is inactive for a certain period of time, there's no need to store certain bits of data, that you can set them to auto delete or archive or whatever the case may be.
Definitely.
But yeah, I agree. I think, it's becoming quite scary out there that how much information a lot of companies collect, and that our information is just out there everywhere, basically.
Yeah, it just increases the value of that to a hacker if they do get access to it.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so website and social media security. So hackers often target websites and social media accounts. What steps should business owners take to secure these platforms and prevent unauthorized access? I can tell you right now, firsthand, the amount of clients that we have that contact us because their social media has been hacked, they can't remember the password, they can't get into it, all those sorts of issues. It very much, especially in the social media space, we see it, there's a lot going on in that space, and especially a lot of those messages. You get private messages, or it looks like your mum's account, your sister's account, all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough one. There's a couple of basic things, and I'm going to start with the obvious one, which is make sure you've got MFA turned on.
Again,
Facebook
yes.
does not turn it on by default.
No.
You have to go and find that setting, but it's a good one. And obviously, if you get alerts to say, hey, this new device is signed into your account, like actually check that out. Make sure that is definitely you. But, there's a couple of basic hygiene things, like don't share accounts. We see that quite a lot where there'll be like a social media @user account, and that gets shared by about 5 different people, and any one of those 5 people who has the password could accidentally leak it, lose it, get phished.
Correct.
So having dedicated accounts per person, it costs you nothing, basically, a little bit of convenience maybe.
Yes.
But also not using your personal social media accounts to manage your business profiles. That's a really important one, where we see a lot of business owners link their personal Facebook account to their Facebook page, and then they'll use that same Facebook account to sign into other services where it could get compromised. So that's a really important one too. The other one I want to touch on, which is tangentially related, but we're seeing a real uptick of this since last year, is actually brand impersonation.
Yes.
And it's not directly linked to a breach of the account, but it's possible for someone to basically duplicate your Facebook page. And we've seen this a number of times towards the end of last year, and it's actually increasing now.
Yes.
And I'll give you one specific example that I can speak to. With this organisation based in Brisbane, they had somebody basically replicate their Facebook page, including logos, photos, copy the whole thing. They just added a PTY Ltd to the end of the Facebook page name, and that was the only difference. And a different phone number as well, which went to the scammer. But then what they did was they started advertising very similar products, but not the same products, to what that business offers. And people would reach out and pay deposits, and they even had branded invoices and everything with Australian bank account details. And the only way that this particular client knew what was going on is customers started turning up with paid invoices for deposits going, hey, here's my invoice. Can I please collect the goods and pay the rest?
Yes.
And they were there going, we don't know who you are. That's not one of our invoices. And we don't even sell that. So, that's becoming really, really prevalent. And the only way that you can actually manage that, because Facebook is quite challenging with takedowns, is to just be vigilant and make sure that you can get your team to all hop on and report it as a scam and all that kind of stuff. It can still take a few months sometimes. It's really difficult to manage, but you have to be on top of your socials to pick that stuff up. Yeah,
and I guess that's the other thing that Facebook's trying to do, is by implementing that meta verified, so that when those sorts of instances come up, if this page is verified, the other pages will be taken down. And I've heard the same thing. We're broadcasting here from the River Studios, and they've had incidents where someone's pretended to be their same page. They've had to put stuff up and run competitions to collect data and all sorts of things. So, it's quite common, and it can happen, unfortunately.
It's pretty scary.
All right. Final question, and then you can get out of the hot seat. So looking ahead in 2025, what trends or advancements do you see shaping the cybersecurity landscape? And is there any new technologies or threats that we should be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're going to start seeing token theft phishing, which is where they steal your MFA as well, becoming much more prevalent, because the tools that allow that to happen are now readily available.
Yes.
So that's going to become much more common. But I think in terms of technologies, the biggest threat we're going to really see materialize this year is AI.
Yes.
So in the cybersecurity space, we've been talking about the AI boogeyman for a few years now. It's actually real now. So a couple of months ago, there was a new product that hit the market called Ghost GPT. So it's like a clone of ChatGPT, except what they've done is removed all of the guardrails and protections so that hackers can use it to do nefarious things. And they've also optimized it by training it on phishing emails and malware.
Yes.
So what that means is that now a hacker can just, they subscribe to the service, it plugs straight into their chat app, so they don't even need to be technical to use it. And they just say, give me a phishing email for a DocuSign document. And it gives them a picture perfect phishing email that they can send out to as many people as they want.
Yes.
Straight to their database. The other really scary implication that a lot of people don't fully understand is with a tool like that, you can actually paste in the source code of a program that you've got that does some malicious things. And normally that program, when it's compiled and deployed on computers to do nasty things, after a while antivirus vendors pick that up and they add it to their definitions. And now if you use that program, then the antivirus on that computer should pick it up, right?
Yes.
What they can now do is take the source code, which is the code that makes that program work, plug that into something like Ghost GPT and say, give me 100 different variations of this program that do the same thing but look completely different.
Yes.
Now that's 100 new programs as far as the antivirus is concerned, but all of those programs still do the exact same nefarious thing for the attacker. Yes. So that's where we're starting to see traditional antivirus vendors get really out of their depth, and this new generation of antivirus vendors, well, we don't call it antivirus anymore, it's EDR, or endpoint detection and response is the technical term for it.
Yes.
But EDR, MDR type vendors, where they're looking at the behavior of the program, not necessarily trying to recognize the program itself.
Yes.
And that's going to have to become much more normalized in small business. Bigger business enterprise has been there for a couple of years already.
Mm-hmm.
Small business really has to catch up on that, because the old Norton and McAfee is just not going to do the job anymore.
Yeah, certainly not. Certainly not. And look, don't get too scared with AI. We talk about AI all the time. The AI can be used for good.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately it is, there is always going to be that element of what software that you do use, someone's going to find a reason to use it for bad.
Exactly.
Unfortunately. But yeah. All right. Well, that's all we have today. We hope that we've been able to give you a bit of insight into cybersecurity and how you can better protect your business. Obviously, if you have any questions, reach out to Martin from BizGuard. He'll more than be happy to help you. Thanks for coming in, Martin. I really do appreciate you stopping in to have a chat to us. And thank you for tuning in to The Hop, a marketing podcast. Make sure that you subscribe and follow us on all of our socials.